Our next segment of subjunctive study focuses on indirect commands, another type of clause that uses subjunctive verbs. We're going to spend a few minutes comparing direct commands to indirect commands. Get down, Sextus! Descende, Sexte! Marcus ordered Sextus to get down. That's a way of saying it indirectly, without the exclamation point and without that special mood of verbs. Wake up, boys! Excitate pueri! Cornelius demanded that the boys wake up. Write letters to me, Flavia! Scribe epistulas, Flavia! Cornelia asked Flavia to send letters. Invite me to dinner, Cornelius! Invita me ad cenam, Corneli! The client begs Cornelius to invite him to dinner. So again, we see a short statement that's direct becoming packaged into something larger that becomes an indirect command. So in the left-hand column, we talked initially about direct commands. In Latin, if you remember, we call them imperatives. It's a special mood of verbs that's devoted specifically to creating a command, which usually, at least in English, has an exclamation point. Imperatives are derived from infinitives. Usually from an infinitive, we take off re, we make the singular form, and then we take that singular form and we add te to make the plural form. This is Latin 1 stuff. This is stuff that I know you already know. Deponent imperatives, as you might remember, work a little bit differently. The singular imperative looks like what you think an active infinitive form should be from the subjunctive verb, from the deponent verb, A plural deponent imperative essentially looks like the second person plural form in the present tense. An indirect command, however, has something entirely different. It features the subjunctive mood, so it's a subjunctive clause. In an indirect command, you have two different verbs. You have an indicative verb that has something to do with asking or demanding, begging, something like that. And then you have a subjunctive verb, and the subjunctive verb is the action that you're commanding somebody else to do. Here are some short examples for you. When you see those examples, I want you to pay attention first to the indicative verb that has something to do with ordering or asking, demanding, begging, something of that nature. And then you'll also see a second subjunctive verb in the sentence. The first sentence, custos alios rogabat, ut in domum procederant. The guard was asking some to proceed into the home. So here we have rogabant, which is our indicative verb that has to do with asking. And then we have procederant, which is the subjunctive verb, which tells you what the person was asking people to do. So in total, we have the guard was asking some to proceed into the home. In our second example, we have Cornelius quoquo imperavit, ne in atrium veneret. Cornelius ordered the cook not to come into the atrium. We have our indicative verb of imperavit. We have our subjunctive verb of veneret. So what's new in the sentence? You're going to notice that there's a little tiny word that you've never really seen before. We saw ut in the first sentence and ne in the second sentence. We're going to use ut in indirect commands when you're asking someone to do something. And you're going to use ne in a sentence when someone is asked not to do something. So ne is a negative, whereas ut, which is positive. No infinitives will be present in any indirect command. An indirect command uses a subjunctive verb because when you're asking someone to perform an action, you need to have an action verb that says what they're going to do, not an infinitive that has that possibility of action but not actual action. The subjunctive action verb is used because it has a personal ending. It has an mst, mus, tis, nt. That way you know who the subject of the verb is supposed to be. Who's supposed to be doing the arriving at the atrium? Who's supposed to be doing the proceeding into the house? You need to look at the ending of the verb in order to determine all that. These are some common verbs that you're going to be required to know that will all be used with indirect commands. Hortor, hortari, hortatus sum, which is to encourage. You can also translate it as to urge. Invito, invitare, to invite. Obsecrare, to beseech. Orare, to beg. Rogare, to ask. Monere, to warn. To beseech is sort of a unique English word, not a very common one. Beseech has a much more urgent element to it than just begging. So you can beg to have dessert one day, but you would beseech somebody if you really needed them to keep that door open because you're coming through with 3 heavy boxes. There are 3 other verbs that you're frequently going to see in the indicative mood within an indirect command. These verbs, however, they take a dative object, and we talked a little bit about those verbs in our chapter 42 translation of the story. We said that the object of these verbs, because they're not directly or physically affected, that they actually become a dative object rather than accusative object. So these verbs are to order, persuadere, to persuade, praecipere, to instruct. If I instruct you, then you would be in the dative case instead of in the accusative case. Here are a couple more examples. Cornelius quidam servo imperavit, ne secundam mensam afferet. So in our first example sentence, we have imperavit, which if you remember from the last slide, means it takes a dative object. So this cui is dative, servo has a dative ending as well. So Cornelius is your subject. Cornelius ordered a certain slave, nay, not afferet, to carry in secundam mensam, the dessert. So you have 2 verbs. One of them is the commanding verb. The other one is the action that's being commanded. In the second one, we have Aurelia amicos Cornelii invitavit, ut apud familiam convenerent. Aurelia is the subject. Invitavit is your indicative verb. So Aurelia invited friends, Cornelii is genitive, of Cornelius, ut to convenerent, gather or to come together with her family, apud familiam. So there are 3 mandatory components of a sentence to make it an indirect command. First, you have to have that commanding verb. Then you have to have ut or nay, and then you must have a subjunctive verb. So by now we've learned 3 different forms of indirect speech, and this chart is here to help you figure out which one is which at a glance. Indirect statements have 3 components. One of them is a head verb, an accusative noun, and an infinitive. Sextus thought that Davis was his friend. An indirect question starts with a head verb, has a question word, and then a subjunctive word. Sextus wondered why Davos did not like him. Commands have a head verb or an asking verb, an ut or a nay, and then a subjunctive verb. Sextus begged Davos to show him some kindness. So there are 3 very different setups for each of these indirect speech mechanisms. An indirect statement has an infinitive, which neither of the other 2 have. So this is what's unique here. In an indirect question, you have a question word, and that's what's going to be unique there. In an indirect command, you're going to have an ut or a nay, which is the most unique element out of the 3 of them. So just be sure to keep your wits about you when you're translating these measures of indirect speech, because they are different. Have a great day. I look forward to practicing with you in class tomorrow.